Hi, this is Realty by Ashley, and today I have a guest, Marty Bodell with Bodell Appraisers. And so I wanted to have a conversation with Marty about appraising. And so, I've put together a bunch of questions that I get asked frequently, and I thought, we'll just discuss this and have it just be kind of an open forum. But first, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been appraising?
Sure. I grew up with a dad who was an appraiser, so I started appraising when I was maybe 10 years old. I'd go out and measure homes with him back in the days of before computers. I mean, we would sketch homes out on graph paper. When I got back from my mission in the mid-90s, I started doing appraising on my own, and I've been doing it full-time ever since.
Awesome. So this is a two-generation, or are there more appraisers in the family? Yeah,
my son occasionally is going out with me, but not that frequently so far. He loves his pizza job right now.
Right. It's a great, hey, I'm telling you, pizza delivery is doing very well during this coronavirus epidemic.
He loves the tips.
My daughter had to quit her hairstyling business, and she picked up a pizza job and doing very well.
Yeah.
So what are the credentials to become an appraiser?
To become an appraiser, you first have to start out being a trainee. The state of Utah has developed a process for trainees where they do an education, typically online, but you can also do it in person. After about a 1 to 2 year apprenticeship, then you can become a licensed appraiser. And then about a year after that, you can become a certified appraiser, which I am.
Awesome. And so as we all know, 2007-08 was a massive housing recession. A lot changed. What specifically changed in the appraising industry?
Yeah, great question. Starting with Governor Cuomo out of New York, they started a lawsuit against several banks and other mortgage brokers, which led to what we now call the Home Valuation Code of Conduct. The HVCC means now that mortgage brokers can no longer select their appraisers directly. There has to be a wall of separation between a mortgage broker and the appraiser. So most of the time now, they request an appraisal, not from the appraiser, but from an intermediary, typically called an appraisal management company.
Right.
A lot of the larger lenders also will have an in-house appraisal management division. And so they can order the appraisal directly through that appraisal management division.
Right. And that really rocked a lot of worlds in the appraisal industry. Like, that's basically restarting your business. So you had to slash all your relationships with realtors and lenders, and now it's just through random selection, correct?
It's not that random. Most lenders will have a list of 2, 3, sometimes 10 appraisers on their list, and they will request that the appraisers rotate through that list. And so it's not direct, but indirectly we still have a relationship with lenders.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So with this COVID-19 pandemic, what have you seen as far as appraisals and home values? What have you seen happen so far, and what do you think, what do you foresee in the next coming months, maybe years?
Great question. First, one thing that we're trying to do when we go out to do our inspections, we're asking people to open all doors and turn on all lights. That way we don't have to touch anything throughout the home. If people request, we're happy to wear masks, booties. I've actually done appraisals with where they requested that I wear a full Tyvek suit and mask and gloves and booties so that I didn't contaminate their home. However, a lot of people at the start were just wondering what was going to happen to the general real estate market. We run analyses, about 5 to 10 analyses every single day for different neighborhoods throughout the Wasatch Front and Wasatch Back, where we're analyzing the average sales price, the median sales price, median days on market, median list price for the different properties. As we go through those analyses, and we end up seeing trend lines develop. The trend line that we expected prior to the SARS-CoV-2 epidemic was that we would see an appreciation which started to occur about the 3rd week of February. That's typically when it's occurred over the past 20 years. By that 3rd week of February, we started seeing some jump in price, but by about the 2nd week of March, that flatlined. We did not see a depreciation. We also did not see an appreciation. It remained fairly flat. For about 90 to 95% of the real estate market around northern Utah. However, what we're starting to see in the past 2 weeks is we're starting to see an uptick in the number of offers. We're starting to see list to sales price ratios, which are over 100%, meaning most of the time these are people that get in bidding wars. And so it'll go back and forth. I've done 2 appraisals this week alone where it was evident that there was a bidding war and the price went over what the asking price was. We're seeing that in various areas, everywhere from Park City to Tooele, where people are bidding up the prices again. So typically we see the appreciation that starts in February and goes until about May. What we are thinking is probably going to happen is that's been shifted back about 3 months. So it's going to start in May and it will continue through May, June, and July. And then it will probably level off in August.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to remember that this is so different than the Great Recession just because this is not a housing crisis.
No.
This was a health crisis that became a financial crisis through unemployment and stimulus money that had to be printed by the feds. And so, but as we see, it really has just, I think for the most part, it's kind of spurred those buyers into really wanting to get into their home. And so if they were on the fence before, now they're saying, now I really want that home. I want that security.
Right.
And so
yeah, and that's exactly it. We're also seeing some initial rumblings, but there's no evidence that the attached condo market may not appreciate as much as the detached, because a lot of people feel like what they want the separation that a single family detached home provides, that an attached condo or townhome may not provide, even though it's largely a perception because you're not sharing
the ventilation,
the air, any of that. You're typically, it's the perception of a separation that a single family lot provides.
Right. I think this will be the year of the single family home as well as the year of like getting out of the city. And so maybe those larger cities, especially areas, your New Yorks, your LAs, people are going to be leaving those bigger cities. Salt Lake, maybe people moving a little bit further out, and you're seeing areas that are booming. Saratoga Springs is booming. So
in the past week, I've done 2 appraisals for a buyer from New York City and another buyer from Chicago. That both, the New York buyer bought a very nice home up at the Alta Ski Resort, and the Chicago buyer is buying a property in Park City because they want to get out of the big city. They want to have a little more separation, a little more elbow room, and they just feel like it may be a little safer for them. Right,
and Utah's been the best kept secret in the nation. We've basically, the secret's been getting out. We've had the largest in-migration in the nation for the last, year to 2 years. It's been really off the hook. So another question for you is, one of the common problems or things that I face with clients is they're perhaps in a situation where it's a divorce situation and they have had multiple appraisals to determine the value of a property. And then they get frustrated that they can't use those appraisals when they are now refinancing the property to divide that equity.
Right.
So you and I both understand, but why don't you explain why is it that the borrower would have to get a new appraisal even though they've had previous appraisals done?
Sure, great question again. A lot of times people don't understand one of the principles in appraising is what we call the intended use of the appraisal. The intended use can change how a property is appraised, what comparable sales are selected, and typically a lender will only have a small list of approved appraisers that meet their rigorous standards, and sometimes not so rigorous standards, but they'll have an approved appraiser list. If that approved appraiser, if the prior appraisal was not done by an appraiser on their list, then they're not going to accept it. They want to see an appraisal from an appraiser that they know and that they trust, performed according to their standards and the way that they want it to be done. My clients all have different standards, and I have to know what client that is, how they want the appraisal done, and what specific details they want included in the appraisal.
Right, and so to their investors, they want to have that liability that their appraiser has done it, and also there's that time frame. So even if it's within the time frame, I know an appraisal is like lender by lender. It's kind of a different case scenario. So it could be a 3-month time frame or a 6-month time frame, but they always want to have their appraiser attached to that
Right.
purchase or refinance.
Exactly.
And so, okay, so one other thing is, what is the difference between an FHA appraisal, a VA appraisal, a USDA appraisal, and a conventional appraisal?
Wow.
Are there some
Great question.
are there some general differences across those?
Generally, they're all the same, right? It's the details that separate out the differences between those. USDA and FHA. USDA actually quotes the FHA HUD handbook for what they want appraisers to do. They want us to inspect the attic, they want us to inspect the crawl space, they want the patios and porches sketched out. But there's also the one that everybody hates that comes up all the time, the peeling paint. Right? And everybody hates it, and it's just it's a problem with FHA that you can't have any peeling paint.
Right.
So it has to be scraped, sanded, repainted, and the paint chips have to be thrown away.
Right.
VA has their own group of appraisers that they very rarely add or subtract appraisers from that list.
I hear you have to be 80 plus.
Maybe not that much,
Okay.
but
Slight exaggeration.
But well, most appraisers are old. If you look at the average age of an appraiser across the nation, it's about 65 years old. It's an industry that we have very few people coming in and very few people ever get out. Once you get in, you're in for good. But the VA appraisers, typically it's a longer process. It is a more expensive appraisal. But all of the VA appraisers that I've met have been very good, very solid appraisers. I like all of them that I've met. Conventional is just a typical appraisal. That's what 90% of everybody's business is, and it's not hard to do those appraisals because you do so many of them.
Right. I know from the realtor perspective, we always dread when we know we have an FHA appraisal, just because they are a lot more stringent on the peeling paint, the handrails. It seems like they pull out the microscopes and the measuring tapes.
They do. It's a lot more stringent. It's harder to get to meet the FHA standards. The biggest problem that we see is, again, the peeling paint and the handrails. A lot of times people don't realize that if your deck is higher than about 30 or 36 inches off the ground, you got to have a railing on them. Same thing with stairs. They want to see a handrail on most stairways. So it does become a problem.
Okay, let's talk solar panels. I know that this is a very common question. So we don't have a long history of solar panels in the state of Utah. They're not as common as, say, California or Hawaii, where it's just expected to have a solar panel system on the home. Then you've got the leased versus owned. How do you appraise solar panels? And are they given a value, or how's that working?
Complicated question. I'm glad you kind of prefaced it with a couple of those things. A leased solar panel does not add nor detract from the value of a property. There are lots of different ways that you can lease them. There are some where the solar panel company will put them on your home and you pay the solar bill to them. It's a cheaper rate, but we've seen that happen. I've also seen where people go out and buy their own and install them themselves, including using a net meter, so that they don't have to pay anything other than the minimal bill that's required to stay hooked up to the electric. Solar panels, typically, if it's paid off and it covers your full electric bill throughout the year, typically you're looking at about a $5,000, maybe $15,000 bump in value. Obviously, the bigger the home, the more air conditioners you use, the higher the bump that you're going to get in your value. What always frustrates me is when a solar panel salesperson comes and says, oh, our new solar photovoltaic cells are going to increase your value $50,000 and you need to spend $40,000 on the solar panels. That's just not true. We've seen no evidence of that. Over the past couple of years, as they have become more prevalent and as we've seen the resales occur, we see that there is not a huge bump, but there is a bump in value.
Yeah, and as they become more common, there can be, because really in appraising, it's all about the comparables, right? And if you don't have comparables, you don't have homes in the area that have solar roofs, it's hard to give that a value because you don't have anything to compare it to.
Right, it's no different than a bomb shelter. I've appraised a couple of homes with bomb shelters, and the problem is that they're so rare that how do you determine what the impact on the value is or something that there may be 10 in the entire valley here that have a bomb shelter.
Right.
But they are becoming more, the solar panels are becoming more prevalent, and so we do have a larger pool of data from which we can draw and infer what the impact on the value is.
Yeah, another concern is that they are removable. So if they are a leased product and they're not paid, the solar company can come and remove those panels, correct?
Yes, and that does happen. The other thing that we see a lot is there is a degradation of the ability of a solar panel to create electricity. The typical loss is somewhere between 2 and 3% from everything that I've read per year. And so you don't recapture the same amount of electricity year in, year out. And after about 20 years, most solar panels don't provide that much electricity anymore.
Right. Well, and there's a new product coming to the market. So Tesla has just now released, just within the last couple of months, released their solar shingles, which I have to admit, from my own personal experience,
They
I
look
was
cool.
really excited about.
Yeah.
So I was so excited. I signed up. I paid my $100 deposit. I was quoted initially about $22,000, and I'm like, oh gosh, that's not much more, a couple $1,000s over what it was going to cost to replace my roof with just the typical asphalt shingle. So I got pretty excited about it, and I was pretty on board to do it. And then they came out and they gave me a quote for $43,000, which doubled the initial estimate, and the recapture on that was 19 years. So you really have to wonder, okay, are you going to live in your home long enough to recapture that, and will you be able to look at that as a sales tool for your next buyer should you sell that?
And we have seen instances in the past where the solar panels have actually not added anything to the value of a home because the optimal position for the solar panel was right on the front of the home.
Right.
And if the solar panel is right on the front of the home and it ruins the look of the home, we've seen instances where it hasn't added any value.
Right, and I've actually seen that often too, where the seller has to pay it off and it did not add to the value.
Right.
So it is a case-by-case basis, but
very much so.
What about pools?
I'm the wrong person to ask because I love pools. But
yes, absolutely. It's about lifestyle. But as far as the investment side, is there a value that you can give to pools?
You should never put in a swimming pool because of the value you're going to get back out on the back end. The swimming pool has to be a choice of saying, I want to have a swimming pool because I think I'm going to enjoy it. Generally, we see a return of about 50% of the cost of the pool in terms of the increase in value.
Right, and I've actually seen a negative return where most buyers didn't want the pool there and actually ended up covering it up, and so.
I've seen that too.
Yeah.
I did an appraisal a couple years ago up kind of by Ogden, and they just filled in the swimming pool with dirt. And so you still had the pool deck on the outside, but the actual pool itself was dirt.
Right. And so this is not to discourage anybody who wants to have that lifestyle.
I would love to have a pool.
A pool is a fabulous thing to have.
Yes.
But just don't think of it as an investment.
Correct.
So perfect. Well, let's talk just a second. Let's see. I have a couple of questions that, in your opinion, what is a great return on investment? Obviously, the solar panel and the pool, maybe not the great return on investment, but what, in your opinion, would be a great return on investment?
The best thing that we're seeing right now is remodeled kitchens. People want specific colors, they want specific styles, they want it to look a certain way, right? There was an affinity a while ago for granite. I still love granite, the natural stone to me, I love. But I also see a lot of people that are preferring the quartz products with the different colors and textures that you can get out of a quartz product are great. We are seeing for about 10 years, the only kitchens you ever saw were white. We're starting to see now where people are doing different colors. We're not seeing a lot of natural colors on the new homes of the wood, but we are seeing blues, grays, still seeing whites, very popular. But people love to see that. And so whenever anybody asks me, there's the obvious ones of carpet and paint, but if your kitchen looks banging, it's going to really help the value of your home.
Right, and just trying to follow those latest trends and styles, but also having that timeless. You don't want to get too crazy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the great areas too is the exterior, the the curb appeal.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
just dressing up the outside, the exterior of the home.
If you're landscaping, I can tell you within about 5 seconds of showing up to a house what the inside is going to look like based on the landscaping in the front of the house.
Right.
If you take care of your landscaping, you're going to take care of your house.
And true that the landscaping should be proportionate to the cost of the home.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that brings me to another question about landscaping and fencing. Is there different values that you can receive for different fencing products or different landscape products, or should you pretty much just try to stay in line with the value of the home and the neighborhood?
Similar to a swimming pool, you should never go nuts on your landscaping or your wall or your fence because you think it's going to add to the value of your property. Mm-hmm. What you should do is you should match everything else in the area. Understanding that if you're going to spend $50,000 on a wall and your next door neighbor spent $10,000 on a vinyl fence, it is an over improvement, but you're never going to recapture that additional cost that you put into it. Same thing with really elaborate landscaping designs that we're starting to see throughout the Wasatch Front, where a lot of people are putting in the raised flower beds. And if you're in an area, Walker Lane, East Draper, some of those areas, that's expected for that. Mm-hmm. But if you're in other areas, that may not be expected, and you're chasing good money after bad value.
Right, right. So one last question for you, and then we'll end this. But if do appraisers take into account when appraising the value of a property the sales price of the home minus the seller's concessions, or is it just the base sales price?
Wow, that was the best question you've asked. Yes, you should, because sales concessions are a motivator, right? Mm-hmm. If a buyer's going in to buy a home, and just to make it easy, say it's $100,000, the seller's looking at it and saying, okay, do I want to take the offer that's $100,000 or the offer that's $105,000 with $7,000 in concessions? Mm-hmm. I make more money with the $100,000 mm-hmm. because I don't have to pay $7,000 in concessions and net out $9,800. Mm-hmm. As an appraiser, we should do the same thing. We should be analyzing any concession and what the impact is on the decision making of both the buyer and the seller. By doing that, hopefully we can gain a greater understanding of the real estate market in that particular microcosm. Yeah.
Well, I lied. I have one more question for you. So we know that anytime the borrower is obtaining a loan, whether it's a refinance or a purchase, they're required to get that appraisal through the lender. But are there non-lender loans that make up a large part of your business as well? So
sure. Non-lender appraisals would be for, like we talked about earlier, a divorce, settlement of an estate, a lot of times for tax reasons. Mom finally passes away and the kids inherit the home. They need to establish a baseline for what the value of the property is. Mm-hmm. And so we do that type of an appraisal. Typically in July, August, and September, we will get requests for people who want to appeal their property taxes. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, my property is not worth that much. I need you to come and give me a realistic appraisal on what it's worth. And there are lots of times that we get those and we come back and we say, I can't help you, because your home is worth what it's assessed at. Mm-hmm. But there are times that there was a mistake at the county, and we can help the county to see where that mistake was and correct their property assessed value.
Right, and so in the situation where it's a lender required appraisal, the borrower does not get to choose their lender, but in a non-borrower situation, such as the estate, the divorce, the litigation, or appealing taxes, you can actually hire your own appraiser directly. And so that's when I would recommend for anyone who's in those situations to come to Marty Marty Appraisers, because you guys are a fantastic appraisal company. How many appraisers do you have working for you?
Currently we have, total I think our staff right now is about 12.
Uh-huh. You guys do a phenomenal job. I know that in the past I had a crazy situation where county records didn't match previous appraisals, which didn't match previous listings. There were 800 square feet off, and I had you come in and save the day and determine the true value of the property, which
Thank you.
was awesome. So thank you so much for spending a minute and having a conversation about appraisals. I think it's really important in the real estate industry to better understand the appraiser's perspective.
Thank you.